Hey guys, I'm Tom and I make electronic music under the name Bamboo Leaves. If you're new here, this channel is for those of you who want to learn about making and releasing alternative electronic music. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, make sure to subscribe to this channel so you can catch these videos as they come out. In today's video, we're going to be breaking down a track in the style of Four Tet. Four Tet has a huge range in his production capabilities and sound in general, so for this video we will focus on his more recent style. This track is modelled around his 2020 single Baby and features UK garage rhythms, chopped vocals and glittery synths. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like to get that algorithm going. So with that out of the way, let's jump over to the DAW. So now we're into the DAW, I'll play it from the start to the finish. Okay, so as usual, we'll start from the top and we'll work our way down through the different instruments and the effects. First up, I've got this atmosphere, so it's a field recording where I'm just sort of playing it so it gives a bit of a bed and a bit of sort of atmosphere to the track, and it kind of just pumps on through because I've got some side chaining on that kick and it just sort of gives a bit more top end and a little bit more space. So let's have a listen to that. Right, so I got that much lower in the mix, so it's really subtle and you shouldn't really be hearing it too much. Like I say, it's a field recording, it's just someone putting a microphone out into a field somewhere or out of a window or something like that, so it just kind of gets that atmosphere of like your daily bustling life going on. So on top of that, I've got a tremolo, so that's just shifting that sound over to the left and to the right, and it's kind of just moving things and keeping you swaying. I've got an LFO tool on there, so that's where you're seeing that side chain pumping coming through, so and then I've got that channel EQ where I'm taking out some of those low ends to get rid of that rumble, and I'm taking out some of those immediate high ends because I want it to be a bit more deadened. And that's it for that, and it just plays the whole way through that track, and like I say, to give that bed sound to it. Right, next up I've got this glitch effect. So I just kind of had this audio sample from somewhere. It's just kind of some glitchy sound effect, and I've included it at the part where I take a break from the drums for a second, things kind of glitch out for a little bit and then everything comes back in. So that is this part here. So like I say, that's just some big audio file that is just doing like a... I just got that from some sample pack somewhere. And so yeah, I've got a fade on there where it fades right in and it fades right out, so it goes... Along with that, I've got a channel EQ to do the same sort of band pass as I have done on the atmosphere, and I've got a tremolo that's just making it kind of go and moving across the stereo field. Alright, so now we'll move on to the drums. So for this track that I say, I've modelled it off the Four Tet's track called Baby from his 2020 single release. It kind of takes some inspirations from that UK garage rhythm where it's like got those really snappy, tight drums that are kind of at a nice fast pace. So this is at 125 beats per minute. So let's have a listen to all of the drums along with some of the percussion just so you can get an idea of how it sounds all together. Starting with the kick. The kick's just kind of going boom, 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 boom. Got like quite a subby kick in there with a little bit of click to it, but I didn't want too much of that top end click, so I've rolled off a lot of the high end and boosted the mid range just a little bit to kind of get those mid clicks going, and to sort of tighten it up a bit as well, I have done a fade out on that audio file, so it kind of dies a little bit quicker than the sample initially had it. Next up, I've got another kick, so it's just sort of like it gives that rolling kick, so dun 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 dun. So the difference between this kick and the first kick is that I have got much more of a roll off on that top end, and I'm boosting the middle a bit, and I've taken out a lot of that low end. So this one is a lot less subby, a lot less bassy, but it kind of gives that roll. Because if it was exactly the same volume and it sounded exactly the same, it would sound a bit mechanical, like duh, 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 duh. But with this way, when you have a slight bit of variation in the sound, it's like duh, 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 duh. It kind of gives that groove, and that's probably something that's quite important in trying to emulate the sound, is getting a groove. And then next I've got this kick 3, which is more of a tom sound, and I've panned that over to the right, and that does another kind of element of this rolling kick. That is a different sample, and for that one I have just rolled off some of those sub frequencies and I've bussed it off to a Valhalla vintage verb room reverb sound. Next up I've got the sort of the snare rim sound. So this is how it sounds, and with the kicks it's like, so like you can hear that with the drum rhythm. It's not like a 4/4 kind of beat, it's like dun duh dun duh dun duh dun duh. Gives that syncopation, kind of has that garage sound, and it fits in with this Four Tet drum rhythm that he likes to put in with some of his tracks. In order to get this sounding kind of tight, I've got a snare sample and I dragged it so that the sample end time was a lot faster than it was initially anticipated with the sample. So if I take off this fade that I've got as well, we can have a listen to see how that sample would have sounded. And with that shortened end sample time and that fade, it sounds more like this. Instead of, it's like, so let's listen to both of them. So that's why I wanted it to be really dead and really quick. It's like, all right, for processing on that one, I have put in the tape delay, not using it for its delay properties, but for using the tape emulation characteristics. So for that, I've got the feedback down to 0%, the delay time down to 0 milliseconds, and the full wet signal and no dry. And I have kind of, to deaden it off, I've taken a high cut and a low cut, and I've kind of got this clip threshold. So it's clipping a little bit, and if I take it off, you kind of hear the difference. So without it, and with it, so it's a lot more kind of crunchier. I've got a Valhalla vintage verb fat snare room sound without it, and with it, very subtle, but there is a bit of that room reverb sound on there. And I've also got a channel EQ to make sure that all of those low ends and the absolute high ends are being rolled off. So next I'm kind of moving on to the percussion elements and little effects in the drums that kind of give it that interesting groove and swing. So I'll just play all these effects and drum percussion parts together. One part of that, I've got these reverse snares. So let's have a listen to the drums with these reverse snares in there. I've just taken one of these rim snare sounds that I used before, and so I clicked on it, I went up into the top and I clicked on reverse, and then that would reverse the sample, and that's where I've kind of thrown it in here. Throw it in there, sometimes before a snare, sometimes before a kick, and it kind of gives it that interesting, I don't know, groove and percussive element to this track. So now I've got a couple of clicks. Right, so those are just some sort of drumstick sounds or some claves or something like that that are being hit together. For that, I've rolled off the low ends and I have bussed it off to the vintage verb room sound so that it sounds like in the same space as the other elements of the track. If I play with a kick, you can hear the syncopated nature to those. So that's something in the Four Tet style, as having those syncopated, offbeat kind of bits of percussion that keep it interesting, keep it groovy. Next up, I've got a tom sample. That is panned over to the left. It's a higher pitched tom than the one from before. I've rolled off the low ends, and again I've bussed that one off to the Valhalla vintage verb. Next up, I've got this click 2. So this comes in the second half of the track when I'm bringing in a few more of the instruments, and I want it to kind of carry on driving. So it kind of adds that just single click on the offbeat. So this is how it sounds on its own. So if I play the first bit leading into the second bit, you might hear as that comes in. and it kind of keeps that rhythm driving onwards. And then last up on the percussion, I've got these two shakers. It's that kind of crunchy, quite simple sounding shaker beat, but it's quite effective in the sort of style of this track because it's quite simple, it's quite tight, but it gives a good groove to the track. So for that, it's the same shaker sample that I've used for shaker 1 and shaker 2, but on shaker 1, I have just rolled off the top end and I've put it into the Valhalla vintage verb via the bus 1. And for the second shaker, I've done the same thing, except from I have used a sample delay to push the sound out to the left and the right. So the first sample is down the middle and the second sample is pushed out wide. That's all of the drums. Let's listen to those again all together. So now we'll get on to some of the sort of instrumental parts of this track. The next sound I've got here is this glittery synth. Right, so that's something I'm hearing with the Four Tet tracks. It's kind of these little chimes that are sort of thrown in quite subtly throughout the tracks a little bit. Gives it a bit of interest, but they're not too prevalent, so it's not like a main focal point. It's just something to give that ear candy to keep you interested. So the main sound generation for this one is in the Logic's Retro Synth. I've got it just down to the triangle wave, fully to oscillator 2. The filter's not doing anything really, but to be honest, it's a really simple sound. So if I take off all of the processing, you can listen to how it sounds. So I can show you the MIDI for that. It's just 2 notes, just going bloop, bloop. So to make that one more interesting and glittery sounding, I've got an EQ on there to just roll off the lows and the highs, an echo on there, giving it that delay. So put an LFO tool on there and that helps with the side chaining of that kick drum. And then I have also bussed it off to bus 1, which is the Valhalla vintage verb, and now bus 3, which is this stereo delay. So the stereo delay is kind of delaying the signal to the left and to the right. It sounds like this with all of those applied. Next up, I've got the sub bass synth. To achieve this sound, I've used the Logic's drum synth. So the drum synth is actually like a kick designer synth, and you can use it to create these sort of subby 808 kind of kick sounds, and it also helps to have these sort of sub-tonal synths. So I've got it so it's this heavy kick sound, and I've got the shapes and tone and decay set as it is. I played with it so I got it to decay at the right time, and so that it had the right amount of tone and the right amount of sort of hard hitting envelope kick sound to it as well. Yeah, so that's actually the only thing I've got for the sub, is just this kind of 808 kick sound, and then I've boosted that bass range. Next instrumentation part, I've got this stab synth that kind of plays the whole way through. So this is how it sounds. On there, we've got a bit of pitch shifting, some gliding, a dun, dun, and then I have a bit of automation on there that brings a delay in, and it's sort of further on through the track, you get this kind of delayed sound that kind of starts to come in. So for that sound, I took a sample of this sort of wash pad sample, and I took a small part of it, and that's just that single part that I'm just pitching around and applying these effects to. So I'll show you that sample that I used in the first place. So to get the sound where it was, I pulled the start time, so I kind of had this section. And then I took the amp envelope down so that it was more of a stab. And that's where I brought in the Valhalla vintage verb, so it's a concert hall sound. Give it a bit of room. I brought in an EQ to band pass it, so now it sounds like this. Much sort of deadened, and it sounds a bit more distant sounding. And then I've got the LFO tool for the side chaining, and I've got the stereo delay. So that stereo delay is what I am doing the automation on. So as I was alluding to before, I've got this automation. So that automation is my send. So it's my send 1 to bus stereo delay. So I'm sending more of that signal to that stereo delay bus as it gets further into the track. So if you listen to it, so there's that delayed sound that's shooting to the left and to the right further on in that automation cycle. In order to get that glide sound that you hear on the synth, I've got the pitch and glide set to 142 milliseconds. So that means that it will move from one sample up to the next. So if I have the sound, and that's where I'm getting that kind of interesting sound. Next synth, I've got a stab sound, but it's sort of a little bit different. It's a higher pitch and it has some sort of different effects on it. So let's listen to it now. It's a really long decay reverb on there. To get that, I've taken that same sample, so I duplicated it, except for this one, I took the sound, I shortened the sample range, and I put it into reverse. So instead of it playing forwards, it's now going backwards. So it's going, and if I play it higher up, and that's you're getting that whoop 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 sound. To help with that as well, to get that kind of whoop whoop element to it, I've got this filter. So the cutoff filter is mapped to the envelope depth. So as it plays with this envelope filter over here, the attack opens up. So you might be able to keep an eye on this one and see how it kind of opens up. And as you can hear, it's got a really long reverb on it. So I've got a 5-second decay on a concert hall sounds, and I've got that mixed pretty high up. So without it, it'd sound pretty deadened. But with it, nice and lush. And that kind of gives the atmosphere to the track, and that's something that Four Tet has, is just these kind of atmospheric elements that kind of get brought in there. So let's listen to it in the track. And lastly, I've got these vocal chops. So I tried to replicate the sounds that Four Tet used in his track Baby. I think it's Ellie Goulding is doing the vocals on that one. So he's kind of got these just chopped up vocals that are halfway through saying something, and then it kind of cuts, and then it pitches it up and it pitches it down. I'm not trying to exactly replicate it, but it sounds quite similar. So for that, it's like a harmony one-shot phrase that I took as a sample. So this is the full sound that I had to start with. Breathe me in, I'll breathe you. So for that first section, I kind of just took this first part, which I thought sounded quite good. I chopped it at this section. I threw it on the start. I then put a little bit of a fade in and a fade out so that those kind of chops weren't popping and clicking, and it kind of gets to this. And then I pitched it down by 5 semitones. I threw on a channel EQ and the LFO tool for that side chaining, and then I bussed it to the reverb and to the stereo delay. And I did similar things with the other parts of the vocal. Let's say I duplicate that sample that I just took there, I push it up, and I selected maybe another part of the sample, this section here. And for this one, I didn't leave it at -5. I put that one back to 0 semitones, so it sounds like this. And it's kind of that hit, that oh. You're kind of pitching it around a little bit, making sure that it's in tune with the rest of the track. And you're sort of just chopping things halfway through the words so that it sounds like it's sort of jutting in there, and it gives it a bit more of a choppy, syncopated kind of groovy feel to it. I did a similar thing for the other vocal section of it, where I kind of do a bit more of a repeaty, jittery feel. Like I just took one of these parts of the samples, I just looped it over like beep 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 boo. what you want to do with something like that, if you're trying to replicate or just create your own chopped vocal, you want to take a sample that sounds quite good, that you can see some potential in. You want to drag it in, you want to just start chopping it in places where you've got vowels or interesting parts of that vocal phrase. And then you want to be pitching it up and down, making sure that you're putting the fades on the start and the end, so you're not getting the pops and the clicks where you're cutting that sample. And just try throwing it in different places of the track, repeating it over and over again, maybe getting some syncopated parts, maybe get some bits that are sat on the beat, and just experiment with it until you get to a part where you think it sounds good, and then just repeat that over, and then that kind of vocal phrase will get stuck in the listener's head, assuming it's relatively well done. Thanks for watching to the end. If you have any questions about any of that, leave a comment and I'll get around to answering them. Once again, if you enjoyed this video, leave a like to help out this channel and subscribe for more videos like this. Other than that, I'll catch you in the next one.